The 18-year-old plumber won't stop looking at me in my own house. It was supposed to be a routine repair. He was young, probably just starting out, covered in grease and wearing a tool belt that hung a little too low on his hips. But from the moment he stepped inside, his eyes found mine, and they barely left. Every time I passed by, every time I leaned against the doorway, I could feel his gaze lingering just a second too long. I told myself it was nothing, until he asked me a question that changed everything. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. You won't believe how this story unfolds, and what really happened when the repair was finally finished. I should have known the moment he walked through the door that this wouldn't be just another awkward service call. He was young, barely 18 if I had to guess, with messy, dark blonde hair that fell into his eyes and a tool bag slung over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. His plain white t-shirt was already streaked with grease, clinging just a bit too perfectly to his lean, toned frame. Hi," he said, his voice low and almost uncertain, as if he wasn't quite used to walking into homes like mine. "I'm Chase, here for the kitchen sink." I nodded, trying to ignore the sudden warmth crawling up my neck. "Yeah, it's been leaking for a few days, under the counter." He dropped his bag near the sink and crouched down, already pulling out a wrench. But even as he worked, I couldn't help but notice it. That glance he shot me every time he adjusted his position, his eyes flicking up just long enough to catch mine before dropping back down. I told myself I was imagining things. Just nerves, right? I'd been alone in this house for months now, and it wasn't exactly filled with excitement. A young guy like him probably looked at everyone that way, just naturally intense without even realizing it. But then, "So, do you live here alone?" His voice floated up from under the counter, casual but somehow loaded. I hesitated by the doorway, gripping the edge of the frame. "Yeah, just me." He pushed out from under the sink for a second, wiping his forehead with the back of his arm, smearing a streak of grease across his skin. His eyes met mine directly this time, and there was no mistaking it. The way his gaze held, a beat too long, a little too intense. "Must get kinda quiet," he said, his lips curving into a half smile. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. It has its moments. For the next hour, I tried to focus on anything else. Emails, folding laundry, even pretending to read a book on the couch. But every time I glanced toward the kitchen, there he was, his broad shoulders flexing under the strain of the cramped space beneath the sink, his jeans riding just low enough to make my pulse quicken against my will. And those glances, they didn't stop. At one point, I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and he slid out from under the counter again, sitting back on his heels. "You know," he said, his voice lower this time, "this leak isn't as bad as it looks, but I'm guessing you already knew that." I raised an eyebrow, confused by the strange comment. "I'm not exactly a plumbing expert." He gave a slow, knowing smile and stood, towering just slightly over me. His shirt rode up as he stretched his back, revealing a line of tanned skin and the faint outline of defined abs. "Maybe not," he said, grabbing his wrench and tossing it back into his bag. "But you didn't really call me here for the leak, did you?" For a moment I couldn't find the words. Was he seriously suggesting what I thought he was? Before I could respond, he slung his bag over his shoulder and headed for the door. But as he reached for the handle, he paused, turning back toward me with a glint in his eye. "I'll be around," he said, his voice a low promise. "If anything else breaks." And just like that, he was gone, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of sweat and machine oil lingering in the air. And a question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. Did I want him to come back? For the rest of the day, my house felt strangely different, like his presence still lingered in the air, clinging to the corners of every room. I told myself it was ridiculous, that this was nothing more than a harmless flirtation, a kid getting bold with his words, maybe testing the waters for a reaction. But the thing that unsettled me most wasn't his confidence. It was how much I'd wanted him to say those things. The following days passed in a blur. I tried to distract myself, went for longer runs, worked late, even cleaned the entire house top to bottom. But every creak of the pipes, every sound from the kitchen kept pulling my thoughts back to him, to Chase. His name stuck in my head like a song I couldn't forget. And then, just when I'd convinced myself it was all in my imagination, he showed up again. It was Saturday afternoon, the sun streaming through the kitchen windows, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart kicked up as I crossed the living room, hands already clammy before I even reached for the handle. And there he was, standing on my doorstep like he belonged there. Same tousled blonde hair, same confident half smile. Only this time, he wasn't in work clothes. He wore a simple black t-shirt that hugged his lean torso perfectly and dark jeans that hung low on his hips. His hands were tucked casually into his pockets, but his eyes, those same eyes that had kept me awake for nights, locked onto mine with a quiet intensity. "Hey," he said, like we'd only seen each other yesterday. My throat went dry. "Is something wrong with the sink again?" He laughed, a soft, warm sound that made my skin prickle. "No leaks this time. Just thought I'd stop by, in case you needed anything else looked at." I leaned against the doorframe, trying to appear unaffected, even as my pulse betrayed me. "You make house calls now without appointments?" He shrugged, stepping just a little closer. "Only for certain people." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us grew thick, humming with something unsaid, something dangerous. "You should come in," I heard myself say before I could even think it through. And just like that, he was inside again, walking slowly, like he was reacquainting himself with the space. He turned toward me once we reached the kitchen. "You ever wonder why I couldn't stop looking at you last time?" I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to keep my voice steady. "I figured you were just being a little reckless, testing boundaries." He took another step closer, close enough now that I could see the golden flecks in his eyes. "Maybe I was," he admitted. "Or maybe I just don't like pretending not to want something when it's standing right in front of me." My breath hitched. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle tension in his body like he was waiting for a sign, one signal that I wouldn't push him away. "Chase," I started, my voice barely more than a whisper. But before I could finish, he reached out and brushed his fingers across my wrist, light, tentative, but enough to send a current straight through me. "Tell me to leave," he said quietly, his fingers lingering. "And I will." I stood there frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Every logical thought screamed at me to take a step back, to keep this line uncrossed. But then, I didn't say a word, and in the silence, he took that as his answer. With deliberate slowness, he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine. Soft at first, just a taste, a question hanging in the air. When I didn't pull away, he pressed deeper, his hands sliding to my waist, his breath warm against my cheek. And in that moment, every hesitation melted into nothing. I wasn't thinking about age or what was right. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I was just lost in him. The moment our lips parted, reality rushed back in like a wave crashing against the shore. I stepped back, my chest rising and falling fast, my mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. He stood there, still close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. His eyes searched mine, calm and steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Was that okay?" Chase asked, his voice lower now, the usual playful edge replaced by something more serious, more vulnerable. I didn't know how to answer. My heart was pounding out of control, and every nerve in my body felt like it was burning under my skin. I should have said something, drawn a line, but the truth was, I didn't want to. Instead, I found myself asking the question I'd been avoiding. "Why me, Chase?" He tilted his head slightly, as if the answer was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because every time I'm near you, it feels like I'm standing on the edge of something I don't even understand, and maybe that scares me a little." He took a cautious step forward. "But it also feels real, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't." I swallowed hard, my hands tightening into fists at my sides to keep from reaching out to him again. "You're barely 18, I managed to say, my voice tight. "You should be out there figuring out your life, not standing here with me." He took another step closer, closing the space between us until there was nothing left but the electric tension humming in the air. "Maybe figuring out my life starts here," he whispered. His words hit me harder than I was prepared for. I could feel the pull between us, the gravity of it. And God help me, I wanted to fall into it. But before I could say or do anything else, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. We both jumped. I turned toward the sound, my mind instantly snapping back to reality. "What was that?" Chase followed me as I hurried into the kitchen. One of the cabinet shelves had collapsed under the weight of old dishes, shattering half of them on the tile floor. For a second, we just stared at the mess. And then, he laughed. A real, carefree laugh that echoed through the house. "Guess the kitchen really does need some work," he teased, flashing me that half smile that sent my heart into freefall all over again. I shook my head, unable to stop the laugh that slipped out despite myself. "Yeah, well, guess you'll have to come back after all." He stepped closer again, this time standing behind me, his chest just barely brushing my back. His voice was low, warm against my ear. "I was planning to, even if nothing else broke." My breath caught, my body freezing under the weight of those words and how easily he said them. But before I could turn around, before I could ask what this all really meant, he was already heading toward the door. "I should go," he called over his shoulder, his tone playful again, but softer this time. "Wouldn't want you thinking I don't know how to make a proper exit." I followed him to the doorway, my heart still hammering against my ribs. He turned to me one last time, standing there on the porch with the afternoon sun casting a golden glow over his face. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." And then, just like that, he was gone again, leaving me standing in my doorway, wondering how someone so young could leave me feeling more lost than I'd ever been in my life. The following days were torture. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened, hoping it might be him. And every time it wasn't, I told myself that was for the best, that it gave me time to think clearly, to pull myself out of whatever dangerous current I'd started drifting into. But thinking clearly didn't seem to be part of my skill set anymore. His words kept replaying in my head. "I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." And the worst part? I couldn't bring myself to tell him to leave me alone. On the third day, the doorbell rang again. My heart practically jumped out of my chest. I paced toward the door, trying not to seem like I was rushing, like I hadn't been waiting for this exact moment. When I opened it, there he was. Chase. Wearing that same easy smile, his blonde hair messier than usual, as if he'd run a hand through it 1,000 times before deciding to show up. "Hey," he said softly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. My pulse hammered in my ears. Hey. He rocked back on his heels. I was just in the area. I raised an eyebrow. Really? You were just in the area of a neighborhood you have no business being in? He laughed and rubbed the back of his neck. Okay, maybe not. But I couldn't sit at home wondering if you were going to pretend that whatever happened between us didn't mean anything. His honesty disarmed me completely. There was no pretense, no games, just raw truth hanging in the air between us. I haven't stopped thinking about you, he added quietly. And I'm not here to push. But if you're feeling even half of what I'm feeling, say something, or tell me to walk away for good. And I swear, I will. My throat felt tight. I wanted to be responsible, the adult in the room, but my heart was screaming louder than reason. Come in, I heard myself say, stepping aside. He crossed the threshold carefully, like he wasn't sure if this was real. And for a few agonizing moments, we stood there in the entryway, neither of us knowing exactly what to say. Finally, he broke the silence. I don't care how complicated this is, he admitted. I don't care if people would think it's crazy. When I'm around you, everything just feels right. I stared at him, my defenses breaking down piece by piece. You're 18, Chase. You haven't lived enough life to know if anything feels right. He shook his head. Don't say that like it's some weakness. I might be young, but I know exactly how I feel when I'm around you. I've never been more certain about anything. I exhaled shakily, stepping closer before I even realized my feet were moving. You think this is easy for me? I whispered. You think I don't lie awake every night wondering how dangerous this is for both of us? He looked at me with such intensity that it almost hurt to hold his gaze. Then stop wondering, he breathed, and just feel it. And just like that, he reached for me, his hands cupping my face as his lips found mine again. It wasn't rushed or hesitant this time. It was deliberate, filled with all the tension and longing that had built between us. And this time, I didn't pull away. I let myself fall. Right there, in the quiet of my living room, the lines blurred, and for the first time I stopped fighting the one thing that felt undeniably real. When the kiss finally broke, neither of us spoke. Chase rested his forehead against mine, his breathing uneven, his hands still gently holding my face like I might disappear if he let go. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my pulse, trying to ground myself in something that didn't feel like freefall. But even with my eyes shut, I could still feel him. His warmth, his quiet presence, the way his thumb brushed softly along my jawline like he didn't want to forget what this moment felt like. I should go, he whispered, but made no move to actually leave. I swallowed hard, every instinct at war with itself. Maybe you should. But neither of us moved, and in that moment, it became painfully clear. This wasn't just some harmless crush for him. And for me, it had already become something far more dangerous than I was prepared for. He finally took a small step back, his hands falling away reluctantly. I don't want to make this harder for you, he said, his voice low, eyes darting from mine to the floor. But I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, more to keep myself together than to push him away. Chase, this isn't just about feelings. People would talk. They'd judge. You're young. You haven't even started your life yet. And here I am. I should know better. He shook his head, stepping back toward the door but pausing before reaching for the handle. Maybe that's the problem, he said softly. You're too worried about what's supposed to happen instead of what's already happening. Before I could respond, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and the house felt impossibly quiet again. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he'd stood, my thoughts a chaotic storm. Was he right? Was I just running from something that was already inevitable? That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Those honest eyes, that disarming smile, the way his fingers felt tangled with mine. By morning, the decision was made before I even realized I'd made it. I grabbed my keys, my heart pounding harder with each step toward the door. I didn't even know exactly where I was going, but somehow I knew where to find him. It was Saturday. He'd mentioned working part-time at his uncle's repair shop on weekends. The drive felt like a blur. Every stoplight a reminder of how crazy this was, how reckless it all seemed. And yet, when I pulled up to the shop, my hands trembling on the wheel, I knew there was no turning back. He was there. Bent over the hood of an old pickup, grease streaked across his forearms, his shirt sticking to his back from the heat. For a few moments, I just watched him, watched the way he worked, focused and determined, completely unaware that he was the storm that had torn through my carefully controlled life. Then, as if he sensed me there, he turned. Our eyes met across the parking lot, and in that single, silent moment, I knew. I didn't want to fight this anymore. Chase wiped his hands on a rag, tossed it aside, and walked toward me with that same quiet confidence that had undone me from the very start. "You came," he said, his voice soft but filled with something I hadn't heard before. Hope. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "I don't know where this goes," I admitted. "I don't know how we navigate it or what happens when the world finds out. But—" I stepped closer, my hands finally reaching for his, threading my fingers through his calloused palms. "I don't want to keep pretending this isn't real." A slow, breathtaking smile spread across his face, and just like that, every doubt, every fear seemed to fall away. "Good," he whispered, pulling me gently into his arms. "Because neither do I." The days that followed felt surreal. We didn't talk about the future. We didn't worry about the what-ifs. Instead, we simply were. Late afternoons turned into long conversations on the porch, quiet moments filled with soft touches and silent understanding. He wasn't just a passing crush. He became my calm in the storm, my reminder that sometimes life doesn't follow the plan. And maybe that's exactly how it's supposed to be. One night, under the soft glow of the porch light, he laced his fingers through mine and said, "I don't know where this road leads, but I'm not afraid of it anymore, as long as I'm walking it with you." I smiled, my heart lighter than it had felt in years. "Then stay," I whispered. And he did. Sometimes the most unexpected moments become the ones that change everything. And in the end, that's exactly what he did. He changed everything.